Awesome, thank you. If you'd like to take your seat then. Yeah, so I think we're going to get to the meat of the program, which is the panel discussion. Before we start the panel discussion, can I just ask people who are still scattered to come take a seat? Probably a bit more comfortable. Don't be shy. The front row, some of them are still empty. Fantastic. Also, another reminder for the Q&A session, please don't forget to put in your questions to slido.com. So without further ado, may I call our second panelist, which is David Gunawan, founder and CEO of Eden Farm, to the stage. And also Rohit Mulani, founder and CEO of TradeID. Awesome.
Okay, so my name is Rohit Mulani. As Tessa mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of TradeID. So we are building a platform that allows Indonesians to invest in Indonesian stocks as well as US stocks. And it's the first platform that will be available in Indonesia.
Okay. My name is David. I'm the CEO and founder of Eden Farm. We supply all kinds of food ingredients to local restaurants, and we work directly with local farmers all across the countries. Thank you.
Cool. I think it's working now. I think obviously Gustaf doesn't need an introduction, so we can start with the panel. So maybe first question I would raise to Gustaf. I know you've been traveling a lot, you said, and India has been one of the bigger markets to target in Asia and also Southeast Asia. May I know why Indonesia and Southeast Asia, and why now?
So when YC started, YC was all focused on US. So the first couple of batches, I think I was probably one of the first foreign founders in YC. I grew up in Sweden, but YC was entirely focused on US companies. Organically, people started applying from different countries, and what we found is that historically, the first kind of group of companies that applied to YC were companies that were planning to move to San Francisco anyway, and they're planning to live in the Bay Area. In the last 5 years, that have changed. So the people that now apply that are foreign are actually focused on the local markets, and they're planning to be in YC for 3 months and then raise money and then move back to where they came from. And the reason they come to YC, the program is typically pretty helpful for them, and the type of advice is not the kind of advice you can easily get in your home countries. The investors that you find through YC is also typically quite different. But ultimately, we're the big opportunities in your home countries. And we funded the first company from India, I believe it was Razorpay, but I could be wrong, 4 or 5 years ago. And since then, the number of companies in India have exploded. We've seen this trend of, so like one company being funded, people having a good experience, telling their friends, more companies being funded, being replicated across many places. So the places where we see the biggest uptick of new companies right now is South America, it's India, it's Eastern Europe, and it's here. So it's Southeast Asia. So that's where we've seen the most amount of growth. I believe India is the third largest pool of applicants today to YC, and I believe Indonesia is top 10 at this point, but it's also growing really fast. The companies we've funded here have done really well, and they have gone after problems that are unique to this country, or they've gone after problems that are not global first, they're like local first, and they're things that this country is large enough to be a really big market. So it makes a ton of sense for us to fund great founders, technical founders that are seeing Indonesia as the primary market. That wouldn't be true if you go to Sweden or some other country. It wouldn't be a large enough market. But this country is a large enough market that if you win in whatever category, you have a really big company. So for that perspective, it makes sense. Our goal is to help the founders. And if founders find our program helpful, it makes sense for us to come here. And if the number of applications is increasing, then we should be here as well. So for that reason, we're now doing remote interviews. We're going to places to do interviews. We're going to try to be here at least every 6 months going forward. And we've crossed, I think, 10 companies now in Indonesia that we funded. And I believe there'll be more in the next batch.
Cool, thanks. So I think we're all sufficiently excited about YCOM, and it's definitely the experience itself is definitely invaluable in building a really fast growing startup. So what I want to know from you guys, the founders themselves, what was it like to apply? Like, I think a lot of us here, probably in the audience, are hopefuls and applying to YC. So what was it like for you guys? Any tips and tricks on how to apply? Starting with you first.
Yeah, so I can share our YC application experience. So essentially, me and my co-founders were back in Singapore at that time, and we decided to apply to YC almost as a Hail Mary. So I've worked with previous YC companies. We had raised a pre-seed round. It wasn't about the money, but having worked with the previous YC company, I saw that, and having worked with other startups in the past, I've seen that the way they execute and the way they think about their customers is completely different. That focus on customers, as well as the ability to think really, really big. And that was what kind of convinced me to pull my co-founders together and get them to apply. So we put in the application. I think we didn't hear back for a while, and we didn't do what. So there's a bunch of stuff online. People were looking at the YouTube videos to see if the number of views went up, and we didn't do all that. So we basically put in the application. We went back to work, and then we got an email to do a remote interview with Gustaf. So that was a 10-minute interview, and yeah, we basically took it. And again, I kept, we were getting more excited, but we kept trying to keep a lid on it. It's like, yeah, we don't know yet. So we're not going to get excited till we get in. And then we were invited to the Bay Area, and we went there. We did the interview. It was a horrible interview. We left the meeting. We left the interview room, and I was like, "Yeah, we didn't get in." So there was no way we're getting in, and we were trying to relive the whole experience and try to figure out what went wrong or how we could have done better. And then I think you came back out. You want to look at what we'd built so far, and that gave us a slimmer of hope. And then we got the news eventually that evening that we'd been accepted. And even though up to that point we hadn't actually made a decision that if we would be accepted, we'd take it, because we didn't want to get excited. But yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer at that point.
And what about for you, David? Any tips and tricks for anyone who's now considering applying?
Well, I think tips for you guys. I think just keep being yourself. Focus on your startups. I think you may have heard about try to do mock interviews, training here and there. I think it's kind of useless, because when you face the real interview, you will go blank, and then Gustaf and other partners will ask you very fast, very precise, very to the points, and then you really have to know what you do. If you know what you do, you can answer their questions. I also did a very bad interview, I think. Thank God, because they gave me a second chance. I do the interview twice. I believe when I did my first interview, they don't know what I'm saying, and so luckily I got the second chance 15 minutes after, and then yeah. After that, we have to wait for, 6 hours, 10 hours until the evening, where the announcement will finally came. I cannot sleep. We are still having jet lag back then, and I cannot sleep. I cannot eat. And then suddenly Gustaf called, and I don't know what to say. I'm very happy. Just fuck okay. And then okay, we'll take it, and then we will go through the process.
Nice. So Gustaf, what about from your perspective as the investor? What do you look for in the startup, and how do startups get their foot in the door to get to that interview?
Good question. So first, what do we look for? So because we've seen many tens of thousands of companies apply, we've now funded 2,000. We have a pretty good idea of things that are like the leads to likeliness of success. We also know things that most of the times, sometimes we're wrong. We don't fund something to become big. Usually we're wrong in the way that that sort of like that company didn't look like a company we would typically fund. And let me talk through what those things are. So the first thing is your team need to have technical co-founders. And by that, it doesn't mean that everyone has to be a software engineer. It just means that the people that work on your company should be able to build a first prototype. If that is a biotech company, then that means something else. If that's a software company, it means something else. If it's a hardware, but the people that are in the team need to be able to build the product. That's the first thing. The second thing is we look for progress. If companies are waiting for us to give them permission to launch, then they're focusing on a different goal than customers. And they should be focusing on their customers, and they should be focusing on the product. And pretty much everything you should do is figure out what are the minimum amount of things I can do to put this thing to customers. And the best companies, they do that. And if they haven't launched by the time they get to YC, and I think about roughly 50% of the companies that apply to YC have not launched when they enter YC, they all launch during YC, pretty much. Like most of them do. If they don't launch, there's some reason they can't do, some regulatory reason or some like research reason, there's other reasons. But most of the people that can launch will launch in the match. So progress and people that move fast and talking to customers is the second thing they will look for. And the third thing, we really look for people that are clear communicators. If you're a startup founder and things go, you're going to spend the next 5 to 10 years convincing thousands of people, customers and employees, why the thing that you do is really meaningful and why you should come and work there or use my product. If you can't convince us, either what you do, like some people aren't able to explain clearly what they do, and the people make is that they are too high level. And people start the interview too high level. We always ask them, no, tell me from the point of view of a customer, what is the use experience from a customer of your product? Don't tell me that you're changing fintech in a revolutionary way. That's not useful. You start by saying, we build an app that does X. Like very, very concrete what your product does. And that is, because it's so important, it's for the people that don't have it perfectly, and you can probably tell us more about this, perfectly nailed. That's what we spend the first month on, is like really, really nailing down how do I explain what I'm doing to people that don't know the product. And then the last thing is we want people to think big, like Rohit mentioned, like describe the world when you've changed the lives of millions or hundreds of millions. How does it look like? What impact have your company had? How did your company play a part in doing that? That's also really important to convince investors and convince employees to go and work for you. So having the ability to think really big, and we can help you with that. But like that is really, really critical.
Cool. Awesome. So now we've gone to this interview stage. A little bit nervous, a bit sweaty. Finally, you found out, yes, awesome, you've been accepted. If I could understand from you, Rohit, what would be the number one key takeaway that you got from the 3 months that you experienced in YCOM?
I think the key takeaway was that, when working with the partners and seeing how other companies were able to progress, every 2 weeks we had office hours. Every week we were kind of interacting with other companies in the batch, like David and other founders. That community was so strong, and they were able to kind of help us overcome a lot of the challenges. And boy, did we have a lot of challenges when we were there. So kind of that community, and we still stay in touch with a lot of founders that we met there. And I hadn't been a part of a community like that before, even having worked with other startups in Southeast Asia. So I think that takeaway was that you have people to lean on. I think we had a call last week. So you have people to lean on. You have people to kind of help you reset and to do sanity checks with that are not in the day-to-day of your business.
Awesome. And for you, David, what was your number one learning while you were in YCOM?
Well, I learned about how to do startup business in YCOM. One of the best thing I learned from YCOM is about the product market fit. I don't understand about product market fit before I enter YCOM. And then what Rohit said is true about the community. We even changed our major strategy after I talked with YC alumni who do similar things with me, but located in different countries. This is one of the benefits of being a YC company. We are connected with all of the alumni, and most of them are doing very, very well. So we know what we will face, and I learned a lot from them. And I also, this is a bit stupid, but I am stupid. So I also learned about the important thing about segmenting the customers, differentiating between corporate and the B2B customers. I learned that from the YC bootcamp. So, for example, for the big B2B customers, they do a smaller transaction, so you have to automate the transaction. That's small stuff like that, but it gave big impact to my strategy and how to hire people, how to manage my team, how to tell them what to do.
That's awesome. So this question is now more to Gustaf. I mean, you guys had the first-hand experience of being in YCOM, but for some of these guys who may not be able to join, what would be your number one tip for us founders?
Let's see. So the two primary ways that companies fail. The first one is the founder don't agree about something, and then one founder leave, and the company goes under. And the second thing is you run out of money. So the two things that you really practice is communicate well with your co-founders and don't run out of money. Statistically, this sounds very easy, but statistically, those are the things that kill startups. But ultimately, what kills startups is you don't find product market fit. You don't build something that people want, and that leads to co-founder conflicts, and that leads to running out of money because you can't raise money. If you really build something that people want to use, then and that's like I remember Michael at YC. He always say, if you have product market fit and you're wondering about if you have it, then you probably don't have it. If you have it, you have nothing else to think about than serving those customers because they are coming down your door in every single way, trying to use your product and give you feedback about your product. So most people, when they see a new product, don't really care. They don't really care. They don't care about what you're building. They don't want to give you feedback. They don't really care at all. And if you're so lucky that you have people that really care, then you are different than most startups. Most startups never get to a point where the customer really care about what they're doing. So how do you find product market fit? Well, you need to spend a lot of time talking to your customers. In the beginning, that means a lot of face-to-face, not in front of a computer, like talking to them, calling them, meeting them. Even if you're not doing sales, you're doing consumer, you still need to meet them and learn from them and see what they react well to and what they don't react well to what you're building. And a lot of companies fail doing that. They don't do that. And the second thing, you need to provide something that is truly valuable. Even if they kind of like what you do, it needs to change the life to the point that they're willing to pay for it. And people are often afraid of charging for things because it might piss off customers. Well, that's a great sign that you haven't built something that people want if they're not willing to pay for it and just use it for free. So I think that the best way to know if you really built something useful is to put a price on that product and see if people are willing to pay for it. If they're willing to pay for it, then you're far along the way. What are other things? Companies tend to give up too early. So founders that are determined to try harder and not switch to a new idea every 2 months. I mean, you can try to fast forward this thing, but determination, everybody was on what they're doing for a whole year. They couldn't have given up many times, and they actually did give up several times. Like they just like, let's stop working on Airbnb. And they didn't work on Airbnb for a month. They came back, let's do it again. So they actually did give up multiple times, but they did have to go through a whole year of failing before they actually started succeeding. So the persistence is a really factor. I think those are probably the points I would mention.
Cool. Okay, so let's talk more about money. I guess at YCOM there's an infamous demo day, right? Where you're having to demo your product to a whole bunch of investors. And I know, David, your company just closed a funding round. Would you be able to talk about that experience of demo day and pitching to investors and how you ended up closing the round?
All right. One more benefit that I can share with you about being YC company is YC is very helpful. They help you a lot in navigating Okay, so one of the benefits of being a YC company is YC is very helpful to help you navigate how to fundraise, how to deal with investors, because when you're at YC, investors will come to you. Then there are a lot of them. A lot of investors will come to you. You don't. This is. It will be your first experience that you cannot remember who the investors that you promised to give a pitch deck, who the investors that you promised you will meet at this day or tomorrow. Yeah, sometimes thanks to Google Map, and then you will Google Calendar, and then you will remember it. But because there are a lot of them, sometimes you don't even remember to schedule their meetings. That's how I can describe to you how many of them will come to you. And then one of the things that I learned in YC is you don't accept investors only for their money, but if you can, you accept money from someone who can give you more value in terms of like market intelligence, or connect you to other investors, or bring you forward to Series A or Series B. Investors who can deal with you in a very short time. Like when you're in YC, you have the bargaining power to ask for an investment to be closed in about a week, or tomorrow, or 3 days. And then yeah, I think that I can share about the investment.
Okay.
So historically, fundraising has been an investor's game. Like 10 years ago, the investors had all the information about fundraising, and the founders would do this once or twice in their lifetime, and had no information. And there was nothing online how you actually fundraise. When I started my company, there was no way for me to learn how to fundraise. Really nowhere. And I thought I would just go meet with VCs, venture capitalists. But they're a whole different set of investors, and you have to learn who are the ones that are meaningful to meet with. And when I did fundraise, I think we raised $1.5 million, and we sold 30% of the company. And for me, that was fantastic. If you compare to what the YC companies in their batch, what they did, that was a very bad deal. So things have changed a lot in terms of the power towards the founders. Now, the things that we have done on the legal side is we try to standardize the fundraising documents. It doesn't really make sense that you have a new contract where you negotiate every single point when you raise a seed round. It doesn't make sense. You should have a standardized contract, and that's what we did. So 5 years ago, we launched the SAFE. SAFE is very similar to a convertible note. It doesn't have the expiration date or the loan, and anyone in the world can use it as long as you're a US company, I guess, but there's now versions of the SAFE in other countries. The SAFE is 2 pages. That's it. There's all the terms. The only 2 terms that you have to really negotiate on is how much money and what's the valuation. And the way it works on a SAFE compared to a priced round, in a priced round, you have to find a lead investor that's going to do the majority investment. And then once you have that investor, you fill out the round with the other investor. When you raise on SAFEs, it's the reverse of that. You are the founder and say, I want to raise $1.5 million. And I think that I'm going to start raising that on $8 million valuation or $10 million valuation. And I go to the investor and say, this is the offer that I want to offer you. And that's basically what these guys did at Demo Day. And the investor then choose to invest, like on the spot, not on the spot, but they are the one that kind of like look at that offer and then decide if they want to invest, instead of waiting for the investor to make up their mind and then make an offer. So as a result of that, we can call it like high resolution fundraising, but basically you're constantly closing. Every day, every week, you're closing new money. You're not doing it all at one big chunk. And as a founder, the most important thing is that you raise the round. If you're fortunate enough to have many investors to choose from, then you choose the best ones. But not everyone has the fortune to choose all those different ones. But the most important thing is to have the money in the bank. And if you don't have the money in the bank, it doesn't really matter if you pick the right investor or not, because you didn't get the money. But if you do able to do that, then it really does matter to pick the right investor. But then again, at the seed round, it doesn't really make sense to have a board member. Like the governance is important, but not before you have a product that people want to use, because there's nothing to govern. Like, you're at the stage where you're really trying to figure out, am I building something that people want? Once it's a real company, where there's a product that is really valuable, to me, it makes sense at that point to create a board and have all the corporate governance that comes with the board. A startup in the first year or two is not a miniature of a big company. It is a whole different organization. And at some points, it takes on the aspects of a big company. And then you need some of the things that you have in a big company. But in the first year or two of a startup, you don't need most of the things that you need in a big company. All you need to do is talk to customers, work on your product, and don't run out of money. Just that simple.
So to follow on that, though, for these guys here who are currently fundraising, any tips and tricks of how to choose investors? What kind of investors? Would it be friends and family first, or bigger names?
Yeah, so for us, when we were fundraising, we luckily had the luxury to pick our investors towards the end. But in the beginning, we needed to get momentum going, essentially. So we called up a couple of friends and family that were their first investors. We had raised a pre-seed round before that as well, so that we had a lot of momentum going into Demo Day, and that was great. So that we ended up picking a lead investor that was perfect for us. So I think essentially what the tip and trick is that there's a combination of you can't go for the investor that you want immediately, because then they have all the negotiating power, they have all the leverage, and you go back to 10, 15 years ago. And if you're building something that people want, then you can tell the investors will come to you, and you have the leverage on that.
How did you negotiate with friends and family?
I was lucky enough to not have to negotiate with friends and family. So essentially, we had a couple of friends that wanted to invest in what we were doing. They really believed in what we were doing. And I'm very appreciative to them for having done that, actually.
Okay, so let's talk about the next big buzzword, which is product market fit. Maybe I'll start again with Rohit. How did you know that you found product market fit?
Well, we're still pre-launch, so we can't say that we have. But essentially, from when we first started out the project, even before we started the project, me and one of my co-founders, Peter, actually flew out here and we interviewed 15 people in 2 days, just to try to get a sense of whether. And we hadn't built anything. I think we hadn't even designed anything. We just met people for coffee and tried to talk to them about what they were doing. We did not try to sell them. We just wanted to understand what they were doing. And then we came back and tried to start selling them, and we were able to sell them. So we found a hack to get them doing what we wanted them to do. And we spent a very small amount of money doing that. And we saw that people were actually interested in what we were trying to build.
And what about for you, David?
Well, I think an indicator that you can see if you found a product market fit is your servers start to break down, your operations start to break down because of the huge transactions suddenly coming in. But you have to do a lot of trial and error, communicate to the customers, know what they really need, and then make that happen for them. If suddenly you found a product market fit, you don't have to worry about sales. And then now you have to change your attention to operational excellence, because the sales will go up by itself, or at least you know how to do it. You just need to replicate the sales model into other region that you are aiming to penetrate. And then you focus more on the operational, and then after that you focus more on the finance. I think that's how you can see you achieve product market fit or not.
Okay, cool. Now we're going to talk about something a little bit more scary. Which is a lot of startups die, right? That's the reality of it. What are the most likely ways, Gustaf, maybe for startup to die, and how do startups avoid it? How do these founders make sure that we can keep going?
So at the end of YC, I think good if you guys remember the last dinner, Dalton, one of our partners, he gives a talk where he have a bunch of examples of companies in YC that died. He doesn't have the name of the companies, but he does have the funding history of the companies, and he talk about exactly why they died. So before you raise your seed round, the most likely way you die is you don't find product market fit, you don't raise any money, or you fight with your co-founders. after product market fit, or after say Series A or Series B, the most likely way you die is you actually run out of money still because you spend too much. So the mistakes people make after their first fundraise is they think that the next fundraise will be as easy. The truth is that every single fundraise, half of the companies die. Half of the seed companies don't raise a Series A, actually more than that, and roughly half of the A don't raise a B, et cetera, et cetera. So every single round, there's a lot of companies that just go away and aren't making it to the next round. So the mistake people make is that they end up spending too much money. So I'll give you a typical example of a YC company that is probably going to die. So you go to demo day, you raise $2 million. Because you raised $2 million, you think that the investors have now confirmed that you found product market fit because they gave you money. So therefore, you must be doing something right. So as a result of that, you slow down your product development. You don't talk to customers as more. You start planning about how you scale your system. But you're not growing. You're not getting users. And then you hire 5 engineers. I don't know how much it costs here, but in San Francisco, that costs a lot of money. And then you suddenly are burning $100,000, $120,000, $150,000 a month. And then you are going to run out of money because the time you raise the next round, you won't have 6 months of runway left. Just do the math. If you raise $2 million and you're burning $100K a month, you don't have that many months to figure out the goals for your next round. And let me tell you, the goals for next round is high. Like you're going to have to hit like $1 million or $2 million in annual revenue to be able to, on metrics, raise an A. Like it's not always on metrics, but typically it's on metrics. And that's not easy. So the best thing you can do is when you raise your first round is you take half of the money and put it in another bank account and you don't touch it for a whole year. You pretend like you don't have it. And you only think you'll have the other half of the money because then you'll be really frugal and use the money in the right way and don't spend on things that don't actually matter at that time. The most successful companies in YC is not that you raise money, find product fit, and just explodes. It doesn't happen that way. It takes time. And the first year or two are slower. And you need to make sure that you're managing the money that you have raised so you don't spend it. That's the most important advice I would give people who have raised money. Be very frugal and smart with your money because it won't be easy and it won't be cheap to raise more money. And the second thing is to always keep the primary focus on the customer and the product and not pretend like you are a different company than you are. Like, it doesn't make sense to go to conferences. It doesn't make sense to spend a lot of time in the press. It doesn't make sense to help all your friends with their companies and be an angel investor and do all these things. You have a singular focus in that time of your company, which is to find product market fit and talk to customers and continue to work on your product. That's the thing that has the highest leverage amount of work. And people tend to forget that after they raise money or early on, and they just start doing a bunch of other things. And we have lots of YC companies that are starting those things because they are fun. It's fun to be in the press. It's fun to get attention. All those things are fun, but it doesn't actually help you with your product at all.
So that's interesting. So when you're raising your seed or whatever, your earlier rounds, what should you be spending your money on? When you want to be.
Well, I think it depends on the company. For me, since the way I get sales is, of course, through direct sales. I'm serving a very traditional market. So the first time I spend my money is to hire a direct salesman, and then aiming for a certain region, the most dense region, and then I think that's the way I use. I can use the capital as efficient as possible. And then after the sales starts to getting more and more traction, I add more and more products because I know the customers want more products. Yeah, that's the second things that I will spend my money on to develop the new product. In my case, I have to develop a new supply chain for that new product itself. So that's the second, because that's what the customers need. And then the third is the operational excellence. Yeah.
Could you elaborate a little bit more? What do you mean by building a new supply chain?
Because say now I only sell tomatoes, so I have to build a supply chain from a tomatoes farmers to my warehouse and to the end customers. And then the next day I want to sell a chicken meat. I have to build a new supply chain. I have to contact another farmers. I have to find logistic partners who can reach that region. So I'm spending my capital to develop that, and then eventually I will spend less and less money because I already have this big supply chain, this big supply network. So I just need to add a little bit more. But I'm keep investing in that space because I know my customers will want me to be their single suppliers. We need to have everything they need, so that's what I'm building on. But the fundamental of spending is still asking the customers what we have to do, and we spend on that area.
So it sounds like a lot of it is on people and then on your product development.
Yep.
What about for you, Rohit?
Yeah, I think because we're in a regulated space, I think the most amount of money we've spent so far is on lawyers, unfortunately. And in terms of the second is essentially on people. So we have not a very large team, but we make sure that they're taken care of. And we don't pay ridiculous salaries, but we make sure that our employees can come in and focus on work and not worry about anything else.
Okay. Yeah, so speaking on regulators or regulations, may I ask you, Gustaf, what your perspective is in terms of should startups be coming in on less regulated spaces, or is it okay to be in heavily regulated spaces already, industries?
Great question. I think that startups that entered regulated spaces that were based in San Francisco, Silicon Valley for the last 10 years, they tend to not care enough, unfortunately, and that had lots of consequences. I mean, for Airbnb, like we were bundled together with all the other companies that got in trouble with regulators, and Airbnb had spending lots of time with mayors and cities on being compliant with the laws of those cities. So Airbnb, one of the first hires that they did was hire Belinda Johnson from eBay, who's the general counsel at eBay, and she was one of the first 20 hires, I believe, and she basically educated Airbnb and had the right strategy and how to deal with regulators, which is not to ignore them, but to engage them and to talk to them, and if you disagree, really try to understand why you disagree, and not assume that you're above them in any way, because you are not, per definition. So whether we encourage companies to enter these spaces or not, I don't think we have a strong opinion, but we do have opinions on if you choose to do it, how do you do it? So we do have good benchmarks for, say, if you're a biotech company, what is the expected next steps? Like, I need to FDA, I need to be regulated by FDA, need to be approval. Like, we have a pretty good understanding of what the investors at Demo Day and the Series A are expecting from you as a biotech company, for example. I think for many of the other companies, regulations do not exist, but we can foresee them. So for all the scooter companies, do not foresee exactly what's going to happen, but once there are thousands of scooters on the streets, then you foresee that things are going to happen. And the first thing you can do is you're hiring someone who is really good at talking to the regulator about what is going to happen. San Francisco is a highly regulated city, despite what you might think. One of the most regulated cities in the whole US. So if you're starting there, you have great experience of what it means to operate in regulated cities, whether it's with Lyft and Uber, with contractors, with scooters, whatever it might be. It's likely that San Francisco is the place where you'll have most amount of trouble in the US. Airbnb has the most amount of trouble in San Francisco and New York. Those are the places where Airbnb is the most regulated in the US. So I think that's probably my answer, but I wouldn't discourage you. I would always talk to someone who's been in that space before to get some advice on what is expected. Every country is different. Regulation work in different ways, and it's more or less transparent, and you want to get a good understanding from someone who's gone through the process on how does it work. So we already funded a company whose primary job it is to help other companies get FDA approved, because being FDA approved is critical if you're building any kind of medical products in the US. And it's a black box for someone who hasn't done it. So working with someone who's seen hundreds of these companies go through the approval process is actually very helpful, because it's absolutely critical for you to go through it. So I think we'll actually fund more companies that will help companies navigate systems like that.
Cool. Any tips and tricks on the ground, right, on how to deal with regulators?
We're still figuring it out ourselves. So
Great. So what about us? I think every day is a learning in terms of dealing with regulators, right? We certainly haven't been the greatest at it in the past, because we're a bunch of really geeky guys who love building, or girls who love building products that can help other businesses. But I think somewhere along the way, it's all a matter of engaging them. It's all a matter of asking early, knocking on the doors early, reading about regulations early, especially in the payment space. Exactly, it's very highly regulated already, right? And you're having to navigate so many different parts of regulators, right? There's not just one Bank Indonesia or one OJK.
Yeah.
There are many parts of it. So I think learning to plot who's who, learning to understand, when we're making new products, where could it potentially fit? I think it's very important. And now that we're slightly bigger, having our guys out there to constantly be engaging regulators and understanding what it is that they want, I think it's very important.
yeah, I think it was either you or Dalton that was saying, and I think that was really great advice, was always be reading the law yourself. Never depend on lawyers to tell you what can or cannot be done. You need to read it yourself, so that you can actually interpret it yourself and test the way that's the way innovation is done within regulation as well.
For sure, and a lot of things that we're doing are actually really new, right? The lawyers probably don't even know how to navigate that themselves. So I think oftentimes, yeah, I agree. It's better to be on the ground yourself, or have someone that you really trust to engage regulators early. I think that's worked much better than engaging lawyers, in our experience. Okay, so that was some heavy questions. Let's go back to another very important thing to reach for a startup, which is to scale, right? And we talk a lot about, and especially the Airbnb experience, which is super amazing, about doing things that don't scale in order to be able to scale later. Can you guys, or maybe Gustaf, you want to share from Airbnb as well, what are some examples of things that you've done that do not scale, that will ensure that one day your products can hit to the next level?
I think so. The learning. There's a great article on. You can search for doing things that don't scale. Paul Graham wrote an article about the experience of Airbnb going through YC, and he's talking through why did Airbnb succeed, and up until then, YC had not funded a lot of companies that were working in the physical world. It was mostly just software products, apps, and websites. But Airbnb is mostly a physical product. Sure, there's a website, you book online, but then most of the experience is in the real world. You stay in someone's home, you're driving there, you find the key, there's figuring out cleaning, you figure out there's tons of stuff that you have to figure out physically. And those are not things you can figure out in front of your computer. So the article, and I recommend you to read it, talks about the steps that is required to get to know a product like that from the users. And the story is basically that Brian and Joe, they flew to New York after they joined YC every single weekend, and they met with hosts, and they asked them, they came under the assumption, I'm going to help you take photos of your listing to put them on the website because the photos are bad. But they also started interviewing all the hosts and asking them questions, what's working, what's not working. And they went really deep. And the day after, they emailed the host and say, here's the photos, we put them back, we've put them up on Airbnb. And by the way, of those 7 bugs that you reported, we fixed 6 of them the same day. And that builds trust with the host. And that was the inflection point on the hosting side for Airbnb, is when they started engaging all the customers, they figured out the things that was wrong and they fixed them. And they built the trust, and Airbnb took off in New York. That was the first market. So that was absolutely core for Airbnb taking off. You can't do that in the same way as you're scaling. There was one job still at Airbnb that doing things that don't scale, and that's the user researchers. They are individually meeting with users every single day. Sometimes they send surveys, but they often just talk individually to one user. It's great to look at metrics, but from one user interview, you can often, or from 10, you can get very much the same direction that your metrics will tell you. And you get the nuance of what people are saying about the product that the metric won't tell you. So in every product team at Airbnb at scale, we had people doing user research and people doing data science to look at the metrics. And both of them are equally important before you start a new product. So you know what the problem is. You know why it's a problem. You know exactly the words people use when they describe the problem. And you know the numbers behind the problem. So most people get started should be doing things that don't scale. At some point, there's some people going to do things that don't scale, and most people are going to try to build the organization, the machine, the scales, that thing that you've figured out.
Well, I think my example is more practical because I sell vegetables. What can you do? Well, I think the example that I can give to you is we serve more than 700 types of products, and half of them is fresh products, vegetables, fruits, meat, fish, and everything. So at first, we do the sorting by ourselves, like using manual labor, sorting the good one and the bad one, because we don't know what to do back then, and this is very unscalable, I know. Like if we add more product and more volume, how can a person know what a good pickles looks like, what a good salads looks like, what a good lettuce looks like? It is almost impossible, but we don't have any choice back then, and then we have to keep up with the demand, so we just do it by ourselves. This is very unscalable. But eventually we figured out that we give the farmers more and more volume, and then so we can ask the farmers to do the sorting by themselves, and we only accept the good products. I think that's how from the unscalable to the scalable. So everywhere we go, because we already have a reputation to the farmers, we can ask anyone who wants supplies to us to do the sorting by themselves. I think that's how we scale.
Yeah, just a quick one for me. So essentially back to the interviews that we did before we even started building our product, we gave, obviously users have trust issues. They don't know who you are. You just come in and you're talking to them about putting their money somewhere. So what we did was we picked 10 users and we gave them $50 each to put in their account. And what we wanted to see was not whether they wanted the $50. Of course, anybody wants $50, but whether they would put more money into the account. And we actually saw people putting a lot more money. And the deal for the $50 was that every time you make a trade, every time you do any action, take a screenshot and send it to us. Send us a screenshot of your account at the end of each month so we can see how you're doing. And then we were actually talking to them every month. Okay, you're down this month. How do you feel? Why did you put more? So, and we started learning about, when they would put money in, what they would look at before they made trades, and that helped us to design our product in the long term. So obviously giving each user $50 doesn't scale, but it was a great way for us to actually engage our users on a product even before we had something to show them.
Great. So I think one last question before we open this up to the audience. We talked about, I think, definitely in a startup, people are your most important asset, right? Without them, you wouldn't be able to grow or to scale a company. And we talked a lot about how, one of the best ways to spend investor money is on people, right? Any tips on, say your first 3 to 5 hires, what you should be looking for, and what your experience has been like?
So I think for us, culture was a really important thing that we looked for. Essentially, you want strong people that can help to contribute to the growth of the company. Obviously, you don't want your superstar assholes to get in early because they set the culture. And I think culture is not what you say, it's not the values that you put on the board, it's what people do when you're not looking. And that was something that we tried to look out for is when interviewing people, would they actually be doing the right thing, or the things that you want them to be doing when you're not looking, when you're not in the office, when they have to make a tough call. So that was something really important to us. And obviously, the way that we have hired our early hires, every single founder kind of sat down with them for at least an hour, and we talked to them. And it's not just about, like, I can't interview a developer at all. I don't know how. So essentially, we set it up, even though it was so small, we set it up so that there's a technical interview, and then there's just a chat, right? So you get a coffee with them, you try to see what they do on the weekends, how they would deal with certain situations, how they've dealt with situations in the past. And that was really insightful to making calls for us.
Right. For me, I'm very lucky. I have a very good HR manager who is very selective and can know whether these people is good for is a perfect fit for our culture or not. Because same as Rohit, I'm looking for a coherence in our cultures. Because when I decide this strategy, everybody on my team has to be need to have the same goal as me. So I'm me myself. I'm not good at finding new people. So I leave to my HR, and she's very good, very good. So so that's how
hire
good she
an HR
is.
person first.
Yeah. So far, all of our team is very perfect fit for our culture, and they're very happy. Sometimes on the weekend they spend it in our office, just occasionally working and having fun, watching TVs. And I also try to invest in a good work environment. Having a nice office has its own benefit. Like this one has its own benefit. I believe everybody working in Xendit is very happy, and I try to make I try to replicate that culture into Eden Farm as well. And then at one point you have to hire a professional. This is what I learned from YC as well. You can no longer only find someone who has the spirit and can have fun with you, perfect fit for your culture, but you also need someone with skill and experience in that industry. Because at one point, after you begin to scale up, you cannot afford to do trial and error, because you will damage your market eventually. So you need to fast track, skip the trial and error by hiring someone who has knowledge and experience beforehand.
Any last tips?
I think statistically, the first 3 to 5 hires are people in your network. So it's people that you either worked with in the past or people that you went to school with, because you're the most likely to be able to convince them. The thing to watch out for when you hire them is that you build a diverse team, because the people that you went to school with or worked with aren't always a good reflection of the rest of the workforce. So that is the thing to watch out for, is that you don't get everyone on the same gender and the same age with the same background. But the big danger with referrals of new employees is that that's what you get. So that's the thing that I will watch out for in the beginning. But that is the most like people to join you, because they already know who you are and they're willing to take a bet on you, and they're much easier to convince than people out there who have offers from a million companies.
Why is that dangerous, hiring people who are like you?
Because at some point, it will push away people who are not like you. If the first 10, 20 people in your company are all the same, it's a very clear signal to people who are not like that, they shouldn't work here.